My very first probate case was a gentleman calling up, crying and weeping hysterically into the phone because his daughter-in-law had killed herself, and the young husband didn't know what to do. And
hi, this is Jeff Marsacci, the Plain English Attorney, and I'm an author, certified Medicaid planner, and an attorney with more than 25 years of experience running my own firm. You're at the #1 place to learn about not only estate and Medicaid planning, but to get business, fitness, and general life success stories. I want to help estate planners and the general public get the tools and advice they need to stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life.
All right, well, this is Jeff Marsacci, the Plain English Attorney and author of Estate Planning Basics, and I am here today with Cara Williams, an attorney who does probate work among other things, and one of my former legal assistants, DeJah Debon, who helped out with probate. So we're going to talk about probate. But a lot of what I try to do as my practice is helping my clients plan ahead to avoid probate. So we're doing things like setting up revocable living trusts and other vehicles, because really I've seen there are 4 really big downsides for probate. It gets to be expensive. If it gets complicated, it can take a long time. There's a loss of privacy for the estate. I got a little interesting story about that. Plus, it's a little bit easier to make contests to these plans and just put it into the probate process. The loss of privacy thing, DeJah's probably heard this at some point, but one Friday I had a client that called me up and he said, "Jeff, I have a Friday afternoon question for you," which was his way of saying he's only going to ask it if I'm not going to bill him. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's fine. So he said, "My dad died in Michigan about 4 months ago. Does that have anything to do with all of these brochures from Mercedes and BMW I'm getting in the mail?" And I'm like, yeah, they found your name and address at the courthouse. They see you're getting a bunch of money and they're going to be right there to help you spend it. Isn't that nice of them? But yeah, there are a lot of... I've been doing this for 25 years. My very first probate case was a gentleman calling up, crying and weeping hysterically into the phone because his daughter-in-law had killed herself, and the young husband didn't know what to do, and that was my first probate case.
And welcome to probate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in fact, when I went into the clerk's office to put in that initial application, she's like, "Oh my gosh, it was that one," because she read the obituaries every day.
Yeah.
She remembered. Okay. But probably the most convoluted story that I have of a probate case was when a client of mine called up because he was trying for years to get his friend to come in and do planning, and he never did. He's like, "Yeah, my friend died. I was out with him on the golf course, and we came back into the club to get lunch. He said, I just don't feel right. I'm going home." And then a few minutes later, the waitress comes flying back in and drags him out into the parking lot. My client's, it's all part of the public record. I'm not going to give last names, but his name is Harry. His friend's name was Charlie. There's Charlie behind the wheel of the car, dead of a heart attack, and his leg braced against the brakes to stop the car from moving forward.
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah. Wow.
57 years old.
That's young. Yeah.
And because Charlie and Harry worked together, everybody at work knew they were friends. Oh, what do we do with this? What do we do with his 401k? What do we do with his last paycheck? What do we do with all this stuff? And so he called me up to kind of help put this thing together. And does he have a will? No. Are his parents, no kids, no spouse, no parents are alive, no, they're both dead. All right, any siblings? He's got 1 sister. Okay, that's the heir at law. So Patricia comes down from New Jersey, and we start talking through things, and apparently both parents had been dead for about 2 years or so, give or take. Both of their estates were still in probate up in New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like, well, okay, we can't really finish that until that portion comes in for the estate. And so Patricia's like, well, this is just so much for me, I can't do it. Harry, will you be the administrator? And so he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. He was my friend. 2.5 weeks later, just after we get the approval for Harry to handle the estate, he calls me up. He's at Charlie's apartment. The police and the fire department are there. Apparently she had been smoking a cigarette on the couch.
Oh my gosh.
And it caught fire while she was asleep, but the apartment was airtight, so she suffocated to death, but it put out the fire. And suddenly all of the cousins are coming out of the woodwork. Oh, Charlie had this, I want this. Charlie had that, I want this. And they're talking about all this stuff at Charlie's. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. None of you are Charlie's heirs. You're Patricia's heirs.
Mm-hmm.
So Patricia was still a resident in New Jersey. So go set up a probate for Patricia in New Jersey. I'll handle Charlie's estate like we were supposed to be doing all along. And we're not giving you anything until we get his half of the parents' estate out of New Jersey to combine with his estate. Meanwhile, you setting up that estate for Patricia in New Jersey, she's also entitled to the half of those parents' estates once those are completed. So yeah, this is probably going to be a couple more years just because of all the ridiculousness that's going on in New Jersey. I'm not going to go too much into the rest of this, but needless to say, I handed this off to another attorney because the attorney they got in New Jersey was just a complete whatever. But anyway, yeah, it ended up with one of the cousins showing up 2 hours early to get Charlie's stuff out of Harry's garage, and Harry with a pellet gun and shooting at him at the driveway and saying, "Get the hell off my property." So, hey, the whole point is if you plan ahead and you use a trust, you don't have as many complications here. But not everybody plans to completely avoid probate. It doesn't happen. So when that does happen, all right, you have to kind of go through this court process. And I write about in my book, as well as other places, that it's kind of a 3-phase process. There's the application process, the inventory process, and then the accounting, either final or annual or whatever works. But that's really why we have Cara and DeJah here to talk more about that probate end, because that's what they do. So tell me, let's start out with that application phase. What do you usually see happening, and what are some problems that people kind of run into that you see when they're trying to do it themselves?
Yeah, what I usually try to tell people is this is really the information gathering phase.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when people try to do it themselves, they hear information gathering and they think, oh, well, I know there's a bank account, I know there's a car, I know there's a house, and that's it. And they forget about all of the other assets that are out there that they maybe didn't know about, or they haven't thought of as being assets. And so we really try to break it down for people and tell them, here's where you need to look, here's where you need to go, because that's what happens all the time. We'll fill out the application for someone, or they'll fill it out themselves more commonly, and then bring it to us, and once we start asking questions and really digging, we realize there's actually more out there than what they initially thought.
Yeah.
I think the application portion becomes more of an information session for them. Mm-hmm. There's so many aspects of an individual's life that we don't know about. We may love our family, we may love our friends, but we do not know everything about them. And also families, believe that, and understandably, there's emotional ties to things, that this is ours. We don't necessarily understand or believe that we should be fully transparent about everything. And it becomes a lot of the protecting them. We're going to look out for you to protect you from making a decision that the court is going to later come back after you for. So going through everything in detail and flushing out all aspects of that person's life is really an information session, but also it's a really good relationship building for us and for the client. And it allows them to get a fuller and deeper appreciation just for how convoluted probate is. Because like you're talking about New Jersey, we live in this beautiful area of people who have moved here.
Yeah.
The majority of people here aren't from here. So people don't understand that assets, family, out of state. Things are going to be interstate connected. It's not just going to occur here. So therefore having to have ancillary probate is a conversation that we end up having to engage in as well, looking at those assets that don't reside in North Carolina, or a lot of cases the families connected who have already been, deceased assets and estates that are out of state that then have to get rolled in as well.
Okay. Yeah, let me tell another story. But DeJah, come a little closer to the mic, or bring it a little closer to you. Okay. Well, yeah, I had one client, her mom passed on, and then my friend said I need to go to the courthouse, or I need to publish this notice to creditors, and so she ran and did that. And then she was getting all of these complications, and then she called me. Well, Mom didn't have really anything other than an account that was payable upon death to her daughter, my client. There was nothing that had to go into probate, but she started the paperwork, and therefore there had to be a conclusion to the paperwork, even if it was, okay, hey, this whole thing was a mistake, we have to put this together, we have to file this. So people hear, oh, you need to do this. When they hear it from a non-attorney, they just start doing stuff that they might not have to do, or they're doing it wrong.
Or paying bills. When they start paying bills on the estate, when no one's instructed them to do that, and then they want that money back. And they don't realize estates take time, and they're not necessarily immediately going to get that back, but they're talking amongst themselves and a non-legal professional, and in a time of emotion, making decisions.
And people always seem to be in a hurry. They have this sense of urgency, and I understand that it's hanging over their head, it's weighing on them. But when they make those snap decisions, like you said, there may not ever be a need for it. And then they've started the ball rolling, and you do have to finish it.
Yeah, and there have been a couple of times where, we already published the notice to creditors. It's like, well, the notice to creditors isn't effective unless you have the probate case number in it.
Right.
But the newspaper is happy to take your money and publish it anyway, and then you just have to now publish it again.
Correct.
Oh, that's a waste of money. Well, you're the one who wasted it. You went there first. If you get this good kind of advice, just stop. Don't rush and do anything. Get to an attorney who understands probate, and you don't end up going down paths that could end up costing money needlessly.
And or order your
and
book.
Effort.
I mean, even if you're resistant to going to meeting an attorney, you think, or even calling, you think there's going to be money involved. There are resources. There are resources like your book that takes them through the basics so that they will save themselves time, money, and in the end, more pain than is necessary.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so what are some of the other things that you kind of see in the application phase? I sometimes see that there's this perception that, this is easy, because when they do fill out that application, it's the quote best guess numbers, because in a lot of cases, banks and financial institutions will not give you a date of death balance or even a current balance. It's, well, we found this statement from 9 months ago, so all right, we'll use that number, and well, the court takes it. Because the end of the application is the person gets the permission papers to actually get that information. Yeah, that can be easy. They can go up to the courthouse, they can fill out a bunch of stuff, swear under oath that this is true to the best of their ability, and file it, and they think the rest of it's going to be that easy.
I think there's a lot of assumption when they come to the table to the application portion. They sincerely believe, and understandably so, that a widow or widower is automatically entitled to assets, even if they're not titled in their name. And that's where planning comes in, that the home is retitled, that instruction is provided on vehicle titling, in all aspects of all accounts in titling. And that's something, Jeff, I know you do a really good job with, is guiding the client through in the planning process, the titling portion, so that when it comes to the application portion in probate, we're just checking boxes off of things that are already going to transfer without having to go through the court. And that's a common, we were married, shouldn't that vehicle automatically go to me? Well, the vehicle's only titled in the deceased's name. I'm sorry, but it is going to have to go through the process for you to assume, the value, the responsibility of it. So that's an unfortunate kind of the portion of the reality of not having planning, and then you're in the application portion, and it's kind of a stark, that's where, the planning would have been a good idea, because now we really do have to push everything into probate and retitle everything.
Oh yeah, we've had widows sitting in front of us crying, thinking that they were getting the family home, and maybe there was an old will that the husband hadn't changed to reflect that. And when people don't change their plans or update their plans, this stuff happens, and people are shocked. Even though they've seen the documents, they maybe didn't understand the ramifications of it, and it's sad and shocking, especially for someone elderly and
or even not so elderly. This is a
right.
situation that happens. I'm told 2 or 3 times a year that there's some gentleman dies. He had been divorced for 15 years, but he never changed the beneficiary designation on the form, and the new wife is just steaming mad that the ex is actually getting the payout from that life insurance policy. And it's like, how can that be? They were divorced. Yeah, but he ignored the 15 years of letters from the life insurance agent saying, hey, come on in and check. Let's make sure all your beneficiary designations are up to date. He didn't. So, okay.
Right. Well, and also just like we've had situations where the will comes into question because they didn't use a professional. They've gone online. Their will doesn't meet the North Carolina standard. That's something else we end up having a conversation in that beginning portion. Well, there's a will. I'm really sorry, but here are the qualifying requirements for the state of North Carolina. And this document that you guys created on your own doesn't meet that. So we now are going to have to create supporting documents. We hope that the people that you had sign as witnesses, if you have witnesses, are still with us so that we can get them to vouch. It becomes very difficult when, the layman doesn't understand what the court requires. And that's where just that conversation with professional planning comes back to saving so much when it comes to probate.
Well, and I'm going to tell another story. I don't want people to think that, if they don't get this right in doing their own will, that somehow they're just not smart or something. No, we're not saying that, because probably the most, I don't want to say egregious, because that's probably too strong a word, but it really was kind of out there, was 2 PhDs, a husband and wife, went and did their own wills. They told me that another attorney put it together. Okay, I looked at it and I said, all right, you do realize that you did not name each other as the first executor. Like, what? Okay, and you also cut each other out as beneficiaries. Everything's going directly to the kids. Wait, what? No, that's not right. And the kids get everything at age 18 if you die. Well, that's way too young. That's what it says. And then I turn to the last page. Okay, you each signed your own wills. You witnessed each other's will, and the second witness line is blank. I'm like, don't worry about everything I just said. You don't have legally valid wills. And they're like, well, doesn't our intent mean anything? And I'm like, whoa. Court doesn't give a about what you may have intended. What they care about is, did you intend enough to have this in writing, properly signed, witnessed by 2 people, and then notarized for everybody to say, yes, this is a legally valid document. That's when the court cares about your intent. But I said, this is nothing. And I said, look, this is so bad that I really need you to give me the name of the attorney who put this together, because this is malpractice. And that's when they admitted, no, we downloaded it and did it ourselves. But again, they were 2 PhDs, very bright people. In fact, I don't want to give away too much, but they were pretty close to being at the very top of their respective fields. But this isn't the stuff that they do every day.
So say if you don't do it every day, you don't know the nuances.
Right.
Exactly.
You wouldn't understand that if you name a parent who doesn't even live in the United States, isn't a citizen here, can't be an executor. There are restrictions. If you wanted somebody to be an executor, but there's felonies. The court is going to go no.
Right.
So that's where having the guidance and being able to tell you what the parameters are. Oh, like you said, it's not downplaying anyone's intelligence to do it. It's getting the proper information so that it's correctly done, so that you don't end up having to become our clients where we're sorting through and fixing the probate problem because you tried your best without any guidance.
Right, and I think when you were talking about people's intent, I think what probate really does is amplify family issues.
Yes.
And that's what we see
Yes.
every day. I mean, you could think you have a normal family dynamic, and something about a family member dying and then money being involved just completely changes a lot of family dynamics. And we see a lot of times relationships breaking down because of money issues. And if the planning was done better, I think it would solve a lot of those issues. We have people fighting over, was it an old spatula?
An old spatula.
A used old spatula.
Yes. Yes.
I tell people that even when they come in within a month or 6 weeks of somebody dying, and everybody's around the table, and it's yes, we're all in agreement, everything's gonna be fine. There's a shelf life of somewhere around 3 to 4 months before people start getting irritated that they haven't gotten their money yet.
Right. Right.
And it's just, okay, we've gone further into the grief process, we're getting back to our lives. Where the hell's the money? Why is this taking so long? And it's what probate just does. It takes time, and it's got to be done right. So and that's also where it helps to have someone else like your firm handling that for them, so that they can blame you and not their brother, and you can explain exactly why it's taking so long, where the brother's like, well, I don't know. It can actually help keep a family together to have you help them with probate.
Right.
Cara just had to have a deep conversation with an opening conversation where it was, so all 6 siblings can't make any decisions together, and but y'all want the money from these parcels of land, right? Either you're going to have to agree, or the court's going to decide for you. And none of those siblings are going to be the executor.
And also, you're going to spend all of your money on attorney fees.
Correct.
If you can't get to this on the same page.
Right. So let's kind of move into the inventory phase. So the application, you've got to list, the assets as best you can, but now the inventory is more exact. They don't want estimates. They want actual date of death values. They want written documentation to back up those values. And now it's like, okay, if they thought putting together that initial application, this was easy. Now suddenly it's like, I've got to go to the bank to get this, and I have to prove this. Or more often, if they're doing it themselves, they're just filing the inventory, and then they're getting slammed by the clerk that, hey, where is all of this other stuff? And you've got no documentation backing this up. And it's, well, that was what it was at the beginning of the month at that bank account. No, it's. So what are some of the things that you see in that inventory phase of putting everything together that some people don't realize, or it just ends up being a big fuss?
There's a lot of frustration. I think people don't realize how exact the court is going to be. And we always tell people, actually, I think DeJah said this first, and I got this from her, but she said, pretend that the court is going to audit every single penny, that everything you do is going to be watched very closely, because in reality it actually is. And because people just think, oh, I can slap some numbers down here, as long as I don't steal the money, I'm going to get away with everything, it's going to be fine. It's just not the case.
Right.
The court wants to see the exact, to the penny, date of death value. They're going to want supporting documentation for all of that. They're going to want values of the cars. They're going to want values of the real property. They're going to want personal property value. If it's something that's, a piece of jewelry that's pretty valuable, they're going to want to see appraisals on those. I mean, they have got to see what this stuff is worth.
And they're going to end up, they need all of that proof and all of that documentation. And then what are some of the other things that typically happen around that phase? Like, you publish the notice to creditors and things like that.
I think there's that becomes, like you were talking about, that's when the work portion comes in. So it's 90 days after you are awarded the letters of either administration or testamentary, whether there's a will with a testament, that's the work. As an executor, it is another job. You are going to have to spend endless hours on the phone. You are going to have to travel to these institutions. You are going to have to put in the manual legwork to collect all the documentation that the court requires. And I think at the inventory phase, that's where people really start questioning the debt side, because a lot of people do not assume that the debts of the deceased need to get taken care of as well.
Yeah.
So when they're looking at the bank accounts, they're like, oh, this is all going to be paid out to us here shortly. And it's like, no, all debts and all assets need to be satisfied. And people don't realize, and I think it's about that 90-day period, because that's when the liens will be set in the court against the estate. Yes, a debtor can place a lien on the estate. In fact, a debtor can force an estate open by placing a lien. So that's really where that conversation, because they do think, okay, all the assets are going to be put in a list, we're going to cash it all out back to us. And it's like, oh, no, let's take a step back. We have to make sure assets and debts are being rectified when we go to turn in that inventory. So again, it's accurate, and we're demonstrating that due diligence in the management of the executor.
Yeah, and this is actually when we were talking about debts, and I was talking about privacy as part of avoiding probate, something that's come up a lot more in recent years, particularly with the way society is now. The adult kids are a lot more mobile. It's not that everybody is born in one place, live their whole lives in one place, and die there. And if you end up with seniors with the 3 kids in different parts of the country, you may see, oh, there's money that's in this estate. Hey, here's this $5,600 plumbing bill. Well, I just assumed that mom ordered that work. I guess we're going to have to pay it. No, it just could be a scam.
Could be.
Right.
So these are things that you also, again, having an attorney help with all of this stuff can identify that type of thing and say, well, wait a minute, let's see the actual work.
And that goes back to where people without consulting an attorney, and they just start paying the bills. Start paying bills, not realizing there's not going to be immediate funds to pay them back. Or like you said, it didn't need to be satisfied in the first place.
Right.
Because there are a ton of scams out there, and they really are focused on the elderly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really disgustingly so. So absolutely, that review of all the documentation and having an attorney guide you to lining everything up so that every asset, every debt has been evaluated by the time you get to that inventory portion.
And we've gotten several people call us at this stage and say, I thought I could do this by myself, and they had already done the application, all that kind of stuff, and been appointed, and they go, I got to this and I realized I actually cannot do it, or I just don't want to do it, it's pain. So a lot of people come in at this point, and then we kind of have to unravel.
Yeah, because that falls into you start with the application, and it's the best guess, right? And you're like, I've got a couple surface items. You get to that 90-day period, and you truly start to have enveloped yourself in this person's life and what they have. And a lot of people go, oh, this is way more than I thought this was going to be. And also way more responsibility and time than I thought it was going to be. Because my buddy from work said that his dad did it, and it was super easy, and it was no big deal, and you just filed a couple pieces of paper at the courthouse. No.
And also when people realize they're actually personally on the hook for this stuff, if they don't get
If
it
they
filed
don't
on
get it
time
done,
and the sheriff's
yeah.
knocking on their door, they go, whoa, I was not cut out for this.
Yes.
Yeah, just fun fact, I used to do a lot of seminars, or planning on doing more seminars on trust and avoiding probate. The only people who tend to raise their hands and say probate was no big deal, I was the administrator or executor of this type of estate and it wasn't an easy one, engineers and accountants.
Right, right.
Yes.
For some reason,
Yeah,
their
their
brains
brains.
just gets, through their training, gets wired a certain way, and it's like, oh yeah, no big deal. But not everybody is an engineer
Yes.
or an accountant. In fact,
Right.
most people aren't.
Right.
Right.
And so them telling someone else, oh, this is easy, you can handle it, no problem, if they're not also an engineer and accountant, you're really doing them a disservice. All right, now that kind of brings us to the last phase where, okay, if they haven't come to you by then, if they've actually gone through and powered through and yes, I got the inventory filed, they're like, oh, well, we now just need to get this accounting done before the 1 year mark. And it's like, okay, I can relax for a little bit. And that quote, let me take a couple of weeks off, just kind of snowballs into, oh my gosh, I've got 4 or 5 weeks left. And now I've got all of this mail to go through because now, okay, you've gotten the application, that gives you your permission papers, then the inventory is, all right, snapshot, date of death, what do they have? That final accounting is, all right, what's come into the estate, what's been paid for bills out to the estate, what's gone to the beneficiaries. We need documentation for everything right down the line, and it's to close the estate. There's got to be a zero balance because everything got paid out to the beneficiaries the right way. And this is where a lot of stuff can just completely go off the rails. And people also, they don't understand what they would consider to be the staggering amount of proof. Another attorney that I talked to, and this is years ago, just like, well, okay, yeah, there was this one hospital bill for $178.15. They made the check out and it's in the statement, check to whatever healthcare, 178.15. And it was numbered, and this was the check. We've got the copy of the invoice. They didn't have the copy of the front and back of the canceled check, so they held up the estate for another 3.5, 4 weeks until they could order the copy of the canceled check, which also meant now there's another expense, which threw the inventory, the accounting off, and they had to redo all those numbers just for that. It's like, oh, that's ridiculous. Well, yeah, it's got to be done right down to the penny in order to work. So, I mean, like I said, if they hadn't gone off the rails for the inventory part, this is definitely where it is. And that's sometimes when people are coming in with garbage bags filled with mail and statements and things like that.
I mean, the final is definitely, in my opinion, the most difficult part. I mean, something as simple as an interest-bearing account can really throw you off. And even if it's just 5 cents, it's difficult for anybody to figure out, okay, now how do we, finagle this to make that 5 cents work?
Yeah.
So for just a layperson to be able to figure that out would be very, very difficult. And people you got misinterpreting the will and paying the beneficiaries that wrong. Now how do you get that money back?
Right.
There's all kinds of issues that you can not only take time, but that you are personally on the hook for now.
Well, and like you were saying, when people want to rush, right? They're in this sense of urgency, and they don't realize that corporations do not have that same sense of urgency. And so that medical bills don't necessarily get processed, filed, run through all the insurance, and have an accurate balance by the time that 90 days even comes up. Sometimes it can take months, and now we're sitting in a pandemic where everyone has, limited people working. Everything takes twice as long, and so where they want to have an instantaneous, actually all those things they need to come in. And of course, we're going to call her my grandma. We are still
Yeah.
we are still battling.
Yes.
A banking institution provided what the court wanted.
It's a banking institution located in America.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. That the court wanted a signature card. The banking institution stated, no, we destroyed that. We can't provide that. And now we're still sitting, waiting for the court to accept this corporation's documents saying, we can't give you what you want. And the poor widow is just sitting in limbo on hold for this one single document from a corporation. And that's the things that the people don't want to wait for, that they don't understand the court is going to be very anal retentive.
Oh yeah.
To the very penny. It must be a zero balance. If you think that you can do some interesting accounting on the accounting, I assure you, you will be required to redo it.
Yes.
There's just no circumventing that. The court is very rigid. It's not TV. The court is very rigid.
Yes. Yeah, I've had no case that I actually had, but a friend of mine, not even another attorney, he ended up being the conservator of his mom's estate while she was incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what we call living probate. It's kind of the same thing. You've got to
Right.
justify everything that you're spending
Yes.
on behalf of this person. And he was just, well, I'm kind of busy. And that was until the sheriff showed up at his door with a summons to appear, and he's like, oh, okay. And then he shows up, and he's like, well, I just don't have the inventory. It's like, do you want me to put you in jail?
Mm-hmm.
And it's at that moment that he realized, oh my gosh, this is serious, and he hired someone and got it done.
Yeah, they don't realize
They
that.
do not. I had a client who decided he wanted to kind of do things on his own and just consult with me every once in a while. I learned my lesson with that. But
Yeah.
he ended up just taking all the money and spending it. There were multiple beneficiaries, and I said, well, where's the money? You're going to have to put it back. I can't get it back. And the court threw him in jail.
Yeah.
And you go, what were you thinking? I mean, the court does not mess around, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, and that's where I'm going to consult with you, but I'm going to make my own decision
Yes.
anyway.
Yeah.
Even though if you tell me, I go,
Oh, he told him, so he called me immediately. He said, I spent all the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's not, I get that on the planning end too occasionally, although, with the process that I've kind of set up for planning, I don't get it as much. Kiara up at the front probably gets the questions. Well, I want to write my own will. I want to write my own trust, and I just want you to review it and look it over and like, all right, so what you want me to do is get paid a very little amount to take all of the liability
Yes.
for all of the mistakes that you as a non-attorney who hasn't worked in this field is. So no, you want me to do it or you don't. You want to do it on your own, you take your own responsibility for it.
I think one thing too with the consulting and what people don't understand, if they're getting advice from someone else from previous state, laws change. Laws endlessly change. The reason that there are professionals to stay abreast in how things change is because it endlessly changes, and that's their devoted field. And so having an attorney to be able to guide you through what has changed from the previous year, which could have fallen into the advice that you had gotten from your friend from who worked, it is no longer applicable. And you can get yourself into some serious legal trouble because, again, if you assume the responsibility as an administrator or an executor, you are legally responsible, as in warrant can be issued on you responsible. And so that just allowing yourself to, I know we have a lot of confidence in ourselves and especially in times of emotion where we're just, that adrenaline of we're just going to do this and, we're just going to take it. Taking time, there is no rush at the beginning of probate. There's no court requirement that you immediately have to get in, you immediately have to get in. No, take time. Take time for your family, take time to grieve. No one is going to be beating down your door, and if they are, call an attorney. Because they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But that there is a reason that having professional help will end up saving you far more than you could possibly imagine. People complain about attorney fees, but the reality is you're going to pay 4 times more without guidance.
Yeah.
Once you have to unravel
Correct.
the mess that you've created.
Correct. Yeah.
So any other comments? I mean, actually, I've got one story from another attorney that this was actually kind of funny, and it's again involving family drama. Apparently, dad died. There were a couple of kids, and there was a nephew, cousin to the kids, who insisted he was promised this high-powered rifle from the deceased father's gun collection, and that wasn't in the will. And well, they hired the attorney, and then the attorney gets this call. Yeah, the house has been broken into. The only thing missing is the high-powered rifle. And so the attorney's who's telling us this story in a CLE class, and he went down to the sheriff's office, and so this is what happened. This is where the guy lives, and the deputies are all falling all over each other. I want to do this. I want to do this. Let me go out, because otherwise they're just like delivering divorce summonses and other stuff. It's like, yeah, this is an interesting one. And so the deputy who won and got the job's like, yeah, come on, you can sit in the front seat. And so they go in the cruiser and they go down there in front of the house where the nephew is, and the deputy says, wait here. He gets out of the car, opens up the trunk, pulls out the shotgun, leans over the front of the car. So he's still there in the passenger side, and there's the deputy, and he's like, yeah, this is so-and-so with the sheriff's department. Come out with your hands up. Click, click. It's like they heard the gun cocking inside the house. He's like, it's at that moment that I realized, okay, I'm going to call the deputies to do this, but I'm going to drive myself and stay out on the street. But they ended up getting the gun back with just a little bit of negotiating. No shots had to be fired, but he was just there. It's like, yeah, this isn't bulletproof glass, is it?
When I was at the clerk's office, we had a similar situation. One of the heirs went to the property, the estate property, barricaded himself in the house, made homemade bombs around the property, and the sheriff's office, of course, had to go out. But it took weeks for anybody to get in there, because every time they'd show up, these bombs would go off.
Wow.
It was insane.
So that leads me into you truly don't know people around you. I'm just going to circumvent back to, we may think that the people in our lives will have the best interest in mind after we pass, right? It, as we've already stated, is quite amazing how emotion and grief will drive people to do rather crazy and at times irresponsible things. And so even though we think that, my sister will take care of it, or, especially now in the age of, with the LGBTQIA community, and if you're not married and you don't have a will, and you assume that everything's going to go to your partner, but then there's family, there's so many things that if you just preemptively planned, there'd be no bombs at the house. There'd be no, if that gun had been in the will, right? If it's just that open and honest conversation with an attorney that you trust that will circumvent and avoid the craziness that Cara and I end up dealing with. Now, it's kind of funny because we truly would rather say we don't have to do the job, right? I mean, we would rather families got along, had planning, but in the end, we're the cleanup crew.
Yeah.
Right. That is so true.
Yeah. Now, where can people get this great information? Okay, my book, Estate Planning Basics, it's available on Amazon. But if you're actually one of our clients, this is part of our process. If you want to do estate planning with me, okay, you call up the office, 919-844-7993, and then Kiara or someone else is going to book an appointment for you about 2 weeks out or more, and we're going to send you a packet with a questionnaire and a free copy of the book. So, okay, it's required reading. Once you get through this book, and again, it's in plain English, you're going to see whether, okay, is avoiding probate a big enough issue for you? For a lot of my clients, oh yes, it is. On the other hand, occasionally I have clients, no, it doesn't seem like that big of an issue. And this is usually my younger clients. They've just had their first or their second kid. They're still kind of growing into their assets. And all right, a will is fine at that point. But you're going to understand it. You're going to understand your options, and you're going to be able to see, all right, here's what actually does happen with probate, but here's what happens with a trust. Here's what happens if you really do need a cleanup crew, or if you plan ahead to avoid that. You can always get more information via my website at livingtrustlawfirm.com. And my Linktree account is linktree.ee/plain English attorney. It's linktr.ee/plain English attorney. There's some free stuff that's up there too. Now, how can people get in touch with you if it's, oh my gosh, so-and-so passed on, I thought we were going to be able to do this ourselves, but I saw this awesome podcast. I need to talk with Cara.
They can visit our website, ncestatesolutions.com, or call 919-612-0890.
Excellent. Okay, well, any parting comments?
Yeah, I appreciate you having us.
Well, I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
have you here.
Love yourself, love your family, plan ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just realized we've done this whole podcast with George in the background, and at this point it's like nobody's just George is just kind of there hanging
It's
out.
masked.
Yeah.
No one
Appreciate
introduced
George.
him.
All right. So say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.